Hello everyone, Gammon here, and this week I wanted to talk a little bit about the video game industry, specifically a little bit about box art or cover art or however you want to call it. And for this video we'll be using the example of Cyberpunk 2077. So the reason we're using Cyberpunk is because the cover art for Cyberpunk recently got revealed and a lot of yelling came from some communities. Now, most of these are just your regular crowd of malcontents trying to get some Twitter likes by complaining about things they don't really care about. However, there were some with very valid complaints. One such person is Outstar, who's a very good YouTuber I suggest you all check out. And her complaint is fairly simple. This cover art is generic. Okay, so personally, I really love the colors they're using, and I think it does set it apart a little bit, but there's no denying that this cover is using the same pose and more or less the same looking character as many others. Uncharted, Bioshock Infinite, Call of Duty, Resident Evil, and many other video games have a man holding a gun posed in a very similar way. It's very standard, it's very generic, it's not creative at all. And I'm here to explain why that is and why personally I couldn't care less, and neither should you. So, before I explain that, we need to talk a little bit about the purpose of cover art. Cover art exists to sell the game, that's more or less it. Let's not forget, whether or not a game is art, and let me say right here, some games are not art, some games are poop. All games are a product. And the purpose of cover art is to sell that product. The only reason video games come with shiny pictures on the box and not, say, gray cardboard is because they want to get someone to look at it, think it looks cool, and buy it. Now, some of you may scoff and say, but Gammon, who on earth is going to buy a game based on its cover art? That's a very good question. And based on a survey performed by the ESA back in 2015 asking consumers what most influenced their decision to buy a video game, the answer is roughly 4% of your consumer base. This puts it at just 1% above critics from gaming websites, which stands at 3%, and slightly under educational value at 5%. Sadly, this is the most relevant and current piece of information I could find. Now, this isn't an academic survey or a study, and I don't really have the source. It's also about 4 years out of date. So obviously you gotta take this with multiple truckloads of salt. It's also, however, the only information I found on this subject. While there may be better, more reliable information, unfortunately this is all I have to go on. So let's at the very least try to steelman this, and let's say that instead of 4%, the figure is 2%. So basically we're just cutting it in half just to make sure that, any erroneous data that may have come from this survey is at least mitigated. So with this new 2% figure, what we're basically saying is that about 2% of your sales are accounted for by somebody walking into a store or, browsing through an e-store, looking at games, seeing a cover art and thinking, wow, that looks cool, I'll buy that. What does that 2% figure mean in real dollar numbers? Well, The Witcher 3 recently sold 20 million units. That's lifetime sales, or at least close to lifetime sales. It could sell more, in the future, but whatever, we'll go with 20. Now let's say Cyberpunk 2077, which is a game from the same developer and has roughly the same hype around it, ends up selling the same amount. And let's say the average price it sold for is about $40. Since, some copies will be sold at a discount. That's $800 million worth of sales. Out of these, 2% is $16 million. In other words, having an appealing cover art can be worth approximately $16 million during a game's lifetime. Okay, so despite being a small percentage of overall sales, for sure, if you have a game that sells gangbusters, a small percentage can end up being very, very real money. This means you want to ensure you have appealing cover art to get as many people's attention as possible. But who are you appealing to? Whose attention are we trying to get? So I actually did try to find some information about who these people are. The people who will buy a game literally based on its cover. The people who judge a book by its cover. And unfortunately, I came out with Bupkis. Unfortunately, we're just gonna have to make some assumptions. In my opinion, most hardcore gamers will already know what game they want before they buy it. They read the reviews, they watch trailers, they know the premise of the story or the reputation of the development studio. A hardcore gamer, for instance, will already know that Cyberpunk is developed by CD Projekt Red, that it's the same studio, the same development studio that did Witcher 3, how good Witcher 3 was, all the hype around it, all of the gameplay systems, that they're working with Mike Pondsmith. All these things are things that an actual fan would know, but the casual won't. Generally, hardcore players are high information customers, and they will buy the game even if it came in an unmarked gray box. For a hardcore gamer, the design of cover art is very trivial and will more or less only influence whether or not he wants to display it or not. And so the people we are trying to appeal to are people without any of that information. They're very low information customers. They don't know anything about CD Projekt Red or The Witcher 3 or anything like that. They're people who walk into a store looking for something for themselves or for other people, and then will see a picture and buy based on that picture. They don't have any of the other reasons that were cited in the survey. They don't know about the premise, they don't know about the development, they don't even read reviews. These 2% literally said that the cover art was the main reason they bought a game. So all that other information was either unavailable or uninteresting to them. Since we know they're not hardcore gamers and we know they don't really have access to most of the other information that's found on the survey, we can kind of make the assumptions that these people are grandmas or parents who are looking for a video game for a relative. These are the types of people who will see box art and say, hey, that kind of looks like something the person I'm buying this gift to has or will like. It can also be casual gamers, like really casual gamers, the people who buy like Madden and then don't buy any other video game in a year. And, when they go to the store and they pick up a copy of Madden or FIFA or Call of Duty or whatever other franchise they're following, they could look at the cover art of this game and say, hey, that looks similar, that looks cool, I'll pick that up too. So these are the people who cover art is generally aimed at. It's not really aimed at hardcore people, they're aimed at very low information people. And the reason they're aimed at that is because that can end up bringing the company millions of dollars. And that's why I'm fine with cover art being boring, generic, or otherwise uninteresting. I realize it can mean huge numbers to the company and it isn't aimed at me. And not just because I haven't bought a physical disc for years, but also because I almost always know what I'm going to buy before I buy it, and good cover art ranks incredibly low on my list of reasons to purchase. And it literally ends up earning the company millions if they get it right. Now, this is not something I'd usually say. I usually wouldn't say, hey, you should look at this multi-billion-dollar corporation and think about them, have a little heart. I'm very much, on the consumer side of things, but this is very, very minor. I find the whole obsession over what is and isn't on cover art, whether it's male or female, or whether it's artistic or generic, it's all so trivial. And you gotta give publishers a little slack here. End of the day, you have to realize video games are a product. They're an industry. And the people working in that industry, even the publishers, need to get paid. This is such a small thing, and it can end up earning a company millions if they get it right. Or at least it might get them millions. It might get them hundreds. It might get them a bunch of money, let's put it that way. And if we make a fuss about every little thing, then nobody will listen when we talk about shit that actually matters. The really horrible things like loot boxes, crunch, or the Epic Store. So let's all try to look at some things from the publisher's perspective and give them a break when what they're doing is genuinely not that intrusive, not that horrible, and can cost them a shit ton of money if they get it wrong. And look, I get that a lot of gamers do like to display their video games. They're not like me. They don't just have a Steam library and a GOG library. They actually have like physical discs on shelves. They like to display them and they want it to be pretty. I totally get that. I can sympathize with that. What I'm asking you to do is to sympathize with the publisher just a little bit, despite them being like multi-billion corporations. Just a little bit of sympathy. And realize what you're asking them is to potentially lose like $16 million or millions and millions of dollars depending on the product, so that you can have a prettier wrapper for your product who you will most probably fucking forget about 5 seconds after you open the case. We gotta be reasonable here. Like, yeah, absolutely, pound them on loot boxes and pound them on other stuff. You gotta give people slack. So that's why personally, I do not care whether or not box art is generic, and I don't think you should either. I hope you found this video entertaining, and thanks for watching.